Conservative MP Jamil Jivani is taking on the cause of helping young men in Canada. His entry point?
Canadian adults should be free to choose the products that work for them.
Nicotine pouches.
Let's free the Zin.
But it's not just that. He is talking about a lot of stuff.
I think we need to have a conversation about liberal racism. I have a message today for every young man across Canada. Everyone who feels anxious about his future because he works hard and can't get ahead. Everyone who wonders if the struggle is worth it. It's not your fault.
Where have I heard that before?
It's not your fault. Don't It's not your fault. Don't with me, all right? Don't with me, Sean, not you. It's not your fault.
Don't do this to me, Jivani. Don't do this to me, man. Jamil Jivani is the Conservative MP for Bowmanville, Oshawa North, and he's definitely not the most recognizable name in politics. Many people first heard of him when he spouted off about how Doug Ford sabotaged the Conservatives during the election.
Do you see Doug Ford as a problem for the federal party in the outcome of this race?
I see Doug Ford as a problem for Ontario and for Canada. I think he's not doing a great job in running this province, and now he's trying to exercise his influence over other levels of government, and it's not like this guy is doing anything particularly well. I mean,
you did used to work for him.
I did. I'm speaking from experience.
But last week, he headlined a tour across university campuses. He called it Restore the North. He told Canadians to join him in discussing the future of our country and how we can restore the promise of Canada. So we joined them. We sent our newly award-winning host Noor to one of his events to find out what those political conversations sounded like. Now, I am a skeptical person. Restore the North sounds a lot like Make Canada Great Again, and touring universities, that sounds a lot like Charlie Kirk. So what are Jamil Jivani's intentions with this tour, and is bringing this kind of thing to university campuses playing with fire? And what does this tour tell us about the state of the conservative movement? Let's get into it. Noor, tell me about your big Friday night.
Huge Friday night. It was a strange place to find myself at a 7 p.m. on Friday. I am walking to TMU's campus. I'm right near Dundas Square. It's like bustling down here. I gotta figure out where I'm going. I'm a woman on a mission, a woman with a dream, but a woman with no sense of direction. I was there for Jamil Jivani's Restore the North tour. This was his fourth stop on his tour. He was at Redeemer University, the University of Guelph, U of T Mississauga.
So apart from all of the glitz and glam of spending your Friday night at Toronto Metropolitan University, why did you want to go to this event?
There are a few reasons, one of them being the timing. I just found that the timing of the event was really interesting. Just days before Charlie Kirk was killed, Jamil Jivani, established this Restore the North initiative, and it was focused on getting young men engaged in politics. And then weeks after his death, he was now going on tour.
We launch it on October 14th. I'm going to as many campuses as I can, and I want to hear from everybody. I'm not going to ask who you voted for, but I want to know what you think we need to do to get the future of this country in order.
And I wanted to get a sense of whether the Conservative Party or Jamil Jivani could, through this initiative, try to repeat some of the energy that we had seen on campuses in the United States. You know, Charlie Kirk was a key figure in helping Donald Trump win the election in the States.
I know I speak for everyone here today when I say that none of us will ever forget Charlie Kirk.
He was a fantastic communicator. He was exceptionally good at engaging young people. And I wanted to get a sense of the Conservative Party could do that. I also think that the fact that he hosted it on a university campus was really interesting. I know a lot of people on the right think that university campuses are almost like this bastion of progressivism. You know, lefties live here. quote unquote woke culture thrives here. Maybe from the conservative point of view, it's like you're going to these places, to the belly of the beast, if you can say that, and trying to find people to engage with politically. You know, Jamil Jivani went on The Hub and did an interview with Harrison Lauman and said, you know, like, I'll speak to socialists, I'll speak to, you know, liberal Canadians, I'll speak to socialist Canadians. And I wanted to see if that was actually the case. That being said, I know I'm comparing this event to Charlie Kirk. Walking into things, I didn't necessarily think that this was going to be some huge Charlie Kirk scale event.
And I'm assuming there was a lot of pushback to this. Like, Charlie Kirk is not exactly a popular figure in Canada.
There was pushback.
It seems very Turning Point USA-ish to me. I mean, come on. I'm sure I'm not the only one that sees this.
I saw responses to the announcement of this event, things like, you know, quote, yours are the false grievances of insecure religious incels and white supremacists. You speak of women as chattel and handmaids, end quote. Quote, Jivani spews right-wing fascist ideals supported by UCP and all the MAGA idiots, end quote. And then I think the most kind of startling one was from Dean Blundell, you know, popular political commentator, and he said, quote, this is what's called victim radicalization. Jivani with a few other Maple MAGA politicians are doing Charlie Kirk TPUSA in Canada, telling young men liberals are to blame for their shitty lives. It's a fucking joke, like Jamil, end quote. I wanted to get a sense of if it was.
Tell me what it was like when you first got there.
There was a security guard at the door. I later learned from Jamil Jivani that the conservative campus actually went through challenges, as he calls them, to get the event booked. And they were asked by TMU to hire a security guard for the event. I don't know. He made it seem like that was a big deal, but it felt like a normal thing for an event where strangers show up to a university campus at 7 to 9 p.m. But nevertheless, there was a security guard at the door. I walk in. Jamil Jivani is standing right there as I walk in, and he's like shaking everyone's hand as they walk in, and he shakes my hand.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Jamil. Noor, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. How you doing? Well, thanks for coming.
And then kind of leaves the room and waits for people to fill up. I counted max about 50 people.
For the whole time.
The whole time, which isn't a lot of people, but the makeup of the crowd was kind of interesting. There were a lot of young people, a handful of women, which, I don't know, surprised me because one of the main topics was about, you know, young men and engaging young men in politics. And there were a lot of older people, 30s, 40s. They weren't the majority. And then there were about like 3 people who I would say were oppositional or against Jamil Jivani and the cohort that was there.
That's not a whole lot of people. Does that tell you anything?
I mean, it was a Friday at 7 p.m. It was raining. We were in Dundas Square. I mean, there's a million other things people could have been doing that night. There's a million other things I could have been doing that night. But also, Toronto is not a very conservative place. Surprise, surprise. Conservatives did make inroads in the GTA, but this isn't their stomping ground, per se. So I'm careful not to make sweeping generalizations about the Conservative Party or their base based on this particular event. Overall, the vibe was nerdy.
What do you mean nerdy?
It felt like a conservative campus club event, you know, like lots of people dressed up in full-blown suits. Many of the people I spoke with were talking serious policy. Like they knew the details, the numbers, the ins and outs. It was almost like they were following the news as much as I was. These weren't your average Joes that, you know, or just you find someone on the street. These are political people. You get what I mean?
And I'm assuming you met a lot of people.
I talked to a lot of people.
Hi, my name is Sarge Chakdai. I'm a political activist, financial professional, and now a student at University of Toronto.
My name is Kate Marland.
Michael.
My name is Joshua Dwyer.
Daniel Moreno.
My name is Shah Khatri.
My name is Will Adams, and I am here today because I like civic engagement.
I'm here because I think that our government needs new fire. It needs some dragon blood in it.
Just curious to see what's going on.
Following Charlie Kirk's death, I, became really concerned about the state of the discourse on campus. And so I've been a longtime fan of Jamil Jivani.
I was here to come in solidarity with my conservative comrades, if you want to call it that, and to also hear what the three MPs had to say about restoring the North.
Okay, so then I'm assuming the event started. What was it like?
Jamil Jivani's kind of opening line was R.I.P. Charlie Kirk. Quote, he left a legacy for young people to debate, end quote. So it kind of opened up with this almost, an ode to Charlie Kirk. So everything that I thought walking into the event, that this was a Charlie Kirk inspired deal, felt a bit more validated when he mentioned him right off the bat. And then he shouted out Jordan Peterson, talked about how he was a staunch supporter of debate on campuses and that we should kind of be doing that, debating, having discourse on campus, and then asked us all in the crowd to pray for him because right now he's going through some serious medical issues.
Okay, so he started with these homages. He started talking about the people that may have inspired this tour, but the actual content, what was he delivering?
Well, we weren't allowed to record any of the event, so I had to sit there and kind of jot things down on pen and paper. We operate in good faith. We could only get in if we agreed not to record. I decided it was just better to see what happened there and report it than not to know it all and not be able to tell you. He started with what restoring the North meant to him, and to him, restoring the North means protecting free expression. He said that right now there are constant attacks on free expression with Bill C-18, which is the, why we can't see news on Meta apps and Instagram and Facebook, and Bill C-9, which is being debated right now in the House of Commons. It's a censorship bill, hate crimes bill, and then just also referenced previous legislation like the Online Harms Act. All in all, restoring the North to Jamil Jivani is about restoring the right to free expression and free speech.
Free speech is not the first thing I think of when someone says restore the North.
Likewise, Sam, but, free speech has been on the conservative agenda for a while now. If you look at the Conservative Party website on free speech, they highlight a case of a BC nurse who was fined and suspended from her job for pointing out that there are two genders. This is a story that was circulating in August, but the Conservative Party website says, quote, whereas this is not how Canada is supposed to be. Canada should be a free country with free speech and free thinking, whereas fining Canadians for exercising free speech is blatant authoritarian censorship, end quote. So that's the case they were referencing, but free speech has become almost this shorthand for being anti-establishment, anti-woke, and conservatives do a very good job framing themselves as these kind of like last defenders of open debate against political correctness, cancel culture, woke culture by people, universities, the media. In the United States, the Republicans claimed free speech was, sacred up until the killing of Charlie Kirk when they went after his critics. So there's a lot in the free speech stuff.
Jamil Jivani is a very interesting figure to a lot of people because he's kind of starting to become a player in the conservative movement. So who is Jamil Jivani? Where did this guy come from?
Jamil Jivani is a really interesting political figure. He's kind of hard to pin down. He's got a little bit of everything. So I actually asked Harrison Lauman from The Hub, who sat down with Jamil just a few weeks ago, about who he is.
Jamil Jivani is a man who's worn many hats. He's been an advisor to the Ontario government on education. That was a tenure that exploded in very entertaining fashion. He's a well-known radio host. The show ended up ending. He alleged that he was treated unfairly and actually faced racial prejudice from his show there. He's an author who's written extensively about the struggles that young men face. He's a graduate of Yale who attended Yale with J.D. Vance. The two of them followed, and we can get into this very interesting sort of paths that in some ways overlapped in terms of their ideological thinking, etc. I believe he's a religious man, very loud and vocal about what he believes in. In Jamil's case, he's someone that completely rejects identity politics as a black man, which makes it all the more interesting. He's a very well-read guy who's extremely articulate and is a political force. When deployed well, I think he's capable of doing big things. And he's interestingly willing to speak his mind, and he doesn't seem to care so much about maybe what his political bosses get. I know he's given a bit of a leash. You saw what he said about Doug Ford when he won I think it was a by-election. He replaced Aaron O'Toole. He just went off on Ford, just almost improvised. It was this beautiful speech he'd prepared. And I don't know any other MP, let alone conservative MP, who would be allowed and would do something like that.
This young people thing from Jamil is not a new thing. He's been focused on young people and young men in particular for a while. This isn't some new grift that he picked up yesterday. I've watched countless interviews of him on places like CBC, and he sat down with Rosemary Barton and talked about the challenges of young men almost 10 years ago now.
I really believe that we should spend the time to point out what men are doing wrong, right? And the harmful ideologies that young men are being drawn to help explain their frustrations. But if you want to fix the problem, you have to offer an alternative.
And it wasn't just MP Jivani here at this event. He had some backup. Who was there with him?
Jamil was joined by Aaron Gunn, who's the MP for North Island Powell River. He was also joined by Ned Couric, who is the MP for Hamilton East Stony Creek, a Vancouver MP, and an Ontario MP.
If our keen listeners remember our miniseries during the election, Sam Google's Our Candidate, both of them were featured. Aaron Gunn was featured for some previous comments on residential school denialism.
Calls continue to grow for the Conservative Party of Canada to drop BC candidate Aaron Gunn over past comments about residential schools. Gunn made posts on X between 2019 and 2021, denying that Indigenous people face genocide in Canada.
And Ned Couric was featured on about him bragging about flipping his property for millions of dollars.
The fastest way to become a millionaire is through real estate. We know that.
Yeah,
you know that.
Made more millionaires than any other industry.
That's where I made all my money. I didn't make it by slinging pizzas. I'll be honest with you.
So two people that raised some eyebrows in the election campaign.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that they were all kind of fresh faces. Jamil was a bit, he'd been around a bit longer than Ned and Aaron, but, instead of putting career politicians, instead of having Pierre Poilievre up on that stage, they had this group of kind of fresh, they're all, in their 30s, they're younger, they all have a very different vibe and attitude and style.
We talked about Charlie Kirk off the bat, but I'll be upfront with my biases here. I am very skeptical about the intentions of these tours. I mean, Charlie Kirk, obviously a lot of our listeners know some of the problems with that. The debates that he held often gave far-right ideas a platform under the guise of, quote, open dialogue. And he was treating topics like race hierarchies and women's roles and authoritarian governments as legitimate points of debate. And by doing that, it makes these fringe ideas sound like valid positions in mainstream discourse. So I guess my question to you is that what this was? Was there some sort, did you pick up on any dog whistles of these far-right ideas in what they were saying, or was it a much more toned down version of these Kirk-style events?
That was one of the reasons I wanted to go, to make sense of whether or not that was the case. They kind of opened up the floor and let people talk about whatever the hell they wanted to talk about. And that's when I felt like, okay, if there was any room for things to get a little frisky, it would be here. So they opened up the floor, people started lining up, and one by one people went up. And it was probably some of the mildest conversations I've heard. A Romanian guy went up on stage and talked about defending Christianity and the problems with liberalism. And then somehow that turned into, you need to do a better job with candidate selection. You had another person go up and talk about, do we deport non-citizens who commit crimes? You know, the group answered yes, because, you know, we need to deal with a system that's not working for Canadians. There was a lot of talk on immigration, temporary foreign workers stuff. There was a lot of, how do we win the next election? How do we make sure more people vote for us in the next election? And when that question came up, Aaron Gunn says something really interesting to me. And he said, it doesn't matter if we, you know, along the lines of, it doesn't really matter if we win an election. What matters is, quote, winning the battle of ideas, end quote. And he says, in that way, you know, we are winning. You know, we should engage with media more. We should, you know, young people don't watch traditional news. We should have gone and done more podcasts and spoken to more people. I thought that was particularly interesting. It was a bit all over the place, a bit mild, but very, very controlled. A lot of people went up there and were only allowed to ask one question. They weren't allowed rebuttals. It really just felt like checking the box off. You know, you went up on stage, you got to ask your question, and now let's move on to the next. I don't know if that was because of a time crunch or whether this really was just a very controlled setup.
The event itself was very controlled, but I imagine a lot of the ideas that people held, you found out later when you were talking to the people that were in attendance. What were people saying to you about the issues that they care about, and why did they come?
A lot of people were concerned about affordability.
I'd say the thing that pushed me the most was honestly housing prices. I saw those going up so much, and that kind of changed my view on who's in charge and who should be in charge.
I think it's cost of living is a big thing, you know, cost of living, how much you pay for anything, you know, whatever you purchase.
I mean, I'm 25 years old. I've been blessed, thank God, to be left a house. So I'm settled there. My girlfriend, however, she's 22. She has no hope of ever leaving her bedroom because she's working a minimum wage job.
Then you had some other opinions.
I personally am much more motivated by the social cultural issues. And sure, we can make housing affordable somehow, but why do we need a house, right? And nobody's really talking about this fact that we need to give young people a compelling vision of what life should be, right? Why do you want to own a house? It's so you can have a family, so you can get married, can have kids, you can be part of a community.
For me personally, it's wokeism. We need to get rid of it completely. For example, I'll bring up the two-gender thing. I strongly believe that there are two genders. If someone wants to transition, you know, from man to woman to man, sure, go right ahead. The they-them thing, though, the third gender, like, come on, that's science does not support you. Very sorry if you believe in that, you're woke. If you believe that that should be then enforced and brought on to this whole new generation, this younger generation, it's a culture of wokeism.
It was clear to me after talking to people that the kind of tone and tenor of the Conservative Party was not totally reflective of the tone and tenor of the people in the room. There were people who were there to just kind of see what was going on and that were very worried about the future and direction of this country. You know, there were two people in the room with some transphobic views. There were people in the room who wanted to end woke culture, and we got here too.
I think that's it's a very disenfranchised cohort of society, right? Men aren't coddled. There shouldn't be, because then you get trans people. But men shouldn't be coddled, but they just over demonization, right? They just look at that Hockey Canada thing. If just invert the genders, right? If a gang of females were in a hotel room and one dude, allegedly, that entire story transpired with that kind of composition of genders, I don't think there'd be a lawsuit. I think there'd be high fives, right?
And I'm assuming because Jivani's whole shtick is saving young men and helping out young men, I'm sure that came up a lot.
It came up a lot in my conversations with people.
At the end of the day, young men are disenfranchised. Men are the majority of people who die in war. Men are the majority of people who die on the job. They work harder jobs, more laborious jobs, I should say, is empowerment, where if you speak to men, it's toxic. So the fact that it's even a problem, that some people see it as a problem, that Jamil talks about young men being disenfranchised, that is the problem. And that is why we have to pay attention to it.
But it didn't come up a lot when Jamil Jivani was on stage. I don't think it was even mentioned once. So again, it feels like there's a bit of a disconnect between the Conservative Party and its base.
Do you think that this whole attempt to connect with people, is this the Conservative Party sort of playing with fire, dipping their toe into these Charlie Kirk style debates and this more extreme rhetoric, or were they actively trying to dissuade from that, or were they just getting a feel for what people had to say?
Well, they weren't necessarily dissuading people. They let people say what they want to say. I think maybe the controlled environment could be a bit of a dissuasion. Dissuasion, is that even a word? But it's definitely a test, and I can see them doing more of these. Are they playing with fire? I would say, inherently, yes. There's a notion that conservatives are sick of the culture war issues. They're done with the pronoun debate. They're done with, for example, they're done with debating over diversity and equity and inclusion. I don't think that is the case. I think they are very much in the culture war issues. They just operate on they just operate on the other side of the culture war debate. So this whole notion that conservatives only care about the economy and affordability and the house and the price of homes, I think is wrong based on the conversations that I was having in that room. Culture war issues, social politics issues are still part of the conservative ether. It's just now we're in a place where I think the Conservative Party is deciding how much and how those issues will be part of their policies. There was a recent poll by Polling Canada that showed that about 45% of the conservative base in Canada approves of the Trump administration's actions taken thus far. So there's something happening here.
Well, it's an interesting event because it's kind of a microcosm of the Conservative Party as a whole. they are hosting this event where they're trying to tone down the rhetoric of the people there, but also appease them in that they're listening to them. So it's kind of like, it's just so indicative of this tightrope that they're walking between approving of the culture war issues, but also trying to seem on the surface like they are disproving of them, and they're trying to only focus on the economy. So really interesting to see that playing out on the ground.
Plus, just a week ago, Pierre Poilievre was going on against DEI and wanting to roll back DEI initiatives. Jamil Jivani, who hosted the event that night, called DEI policies, liberal racism. So the social issues are very much part of the Conservative Party. Again, it's just about how much of it and which of the issues that they're going to take on.
And like ultimately the goal of this is to increase dialogue, which I don't think you can poo-poo. I think it is an important thing. So it's easy to get hung up on the people there that had some extreme views, but I don't think you can argue that this thing doesn't have a place in our political landscape.
I would have said that if they had opened up the debate. If you could have asked more than one question, if you could have asked a follow-up question. There was someone who went up and asked about the temporary foreign worker program and actually had a pretty convincing argument. He was not allowed a follow-up. He was not allowed a rebuttal. He got up, asked one question, got shot down, and was asked to sit back down. If this was debate, if this was people from all sorts of political backgrounds come here and let's have discourse, I'm all for that. I'm not sure that's what this was.
That doesn't really sound very Charlie Kirk of him.
Charlie Kirk at least had the political courage to engage in conversation, to do rebuttals, to do the whole back and forth in front of huge crowds of people, no less. That wasn't the case at this particular event. 50 people showed up. This was like a glorified private event for people who agreed with him. I mentioned this earlier. We weren't allowed to record the event. Charlie Kirk's events were plastered for the world to see. There were more cameras than people at his event. I know I'm like being hyperbolic, but what I'm trying to say is Jivani is explicitly invoking Charlie Kirk. It was the first name he mentioned in his opening speech, and he's, emulating Kirk's approach to open discourse by going to university campuses and doing these tours. But the guy isn't letting me record it? I don't know.
So you're saying Jamil is no Charlie Kirk. Jamil did not pull off what Charlie Kirk wanted to do.
He tried, and he failed.
All right, that is our show for this week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And as always, remember to hit like, hit subscribe, hit the little bell on the bottom there. It's where it tells you to get notified if we post. And you know what? You can share it with your friends. I'll see you next week.